Hi, I'm Claire. I'm 36 years old, recently recovering from surgery, and the kind of daughter who never asks for much, until the one time I needed to. And even then I was told, she's fine. She just wants attention. That sentence, it was a text. A stupid, careless message accidentally sent to me by the woman who raised me, my mother. I had just gotten home from the hospital. 4 nights in recovery, 3 rounds of anesthesia, 2 transfusions, 1 clear reminder. I was alone. No flowers, no phone calls, not even a card. The day I was wheeled out in a haze of painkillers and blinking fluorescent lights, I checked my phone and saw photos of my sister Paige laughing in a rented ballroom under gold balloons, a cake the size of my kitchen table, a string quartet. My mom grinning beside her in a sequined dress I'd never seen before. And then, like a punch to the gut, the text. I don't even know who it was meant for. One of her friends, maybe. Maybe my aunt. Maybe the caterer. But it was sent to me. She's fine. She just wants attention. Let's focus on Paige's night. It's a big deal. I didn't respond. I didn't call. I just laid there in bed, sore and swollen and more broken than my body could explain. I stared at that message for hours, until the screen dimmed and my fingers went numb, and I kept hearing that voice in my head, not my own, but hers. That voice I'd grown up with, dismissive, breezy, always too busy for what I felt. I used to wonder, as a little girl, if maybe I just wasn't interesting enough to be loved. Paige was loud and shiny and cried in front of people. I was the one who handled things, who didn't make a fuss, who stitched her own costume when Mom forgot the recital, who ate lunch in the nurse's office when the cramps got too bad, but never told anyone. I didn't want to cause a scene. But this was different, because now I was the one bleeding, literally, and they were pouring champagne in a rented hall under my name. Let me explain. 3 months earlier, my mother had begged me to help plan Paige's 30th birthday party. She wanted it to be classy but memorable. She was nervous, she said. Paige had just gone through a breakup. She needed something to lift her spirits. I understood. I always do. So I helped. I contacted the venue. I booked the caterer through a friend. I lent my credit card for deposits with the promise she'd reimburse me in a few weeks. It wasn't a big deal at the time. I had the funds. I was used to handling logistics. Hell, I practically am logistics in my family. And besides, I was focused on something bigger, my upcoming surgery. It wasn't cosmetic. It wasn't optional. It was a necessary procedure. Corrective surgery for a condition I'd silently struggled with for years. One that came with chronic pain, infections, and quietly enduring what others never saw. When I told my mom about the date being scheduled, she barely reacted. "Oh, sweetheart, that's the same week as the party. Are you sure you're okay going through with it now?" I remember blinking at the phone. "Going through with it?" I said, "Yes." "It's not like I can just reschedule my insides." She laughed, said I was always so dramatic, said she'd check in after things settled down with the party. That check-in never came. I went under anesthesia on a Thursday morning, woke up that evening nauseated and sore. They removed more than they expected. Scarring, tissue. The doctor said recovery would take longer. I remember gripping the edges of the hospital bed during the first night, breath caught in my throat from the pain, biting the inside of my cheek so the nurse wouldn't hear me cry. I thought, maybe she'll show up tomorrow. She didn't. I thought, maybe she'll call. She didn't. Instead, I opened Instagram the next day to a tagged photo. Paige in a silver dress surrounded by balloons, holding a champagne flute, mid-laugh. And there, like a cherry on top, was my mother in the background, smiling, holding a microphone, toasting the best daughter a mom could ask for. I'm not exaggerating. That was the caption on her post. To the best daughter a mom could ask for. You want to know what I did next? Nothing. No angry texts, no emotional phone calls, no dramatic confrontations. I just lay there, in my quiet apartment, with the blinds drawn and my post-op stitches itching. I stared at the photos and felt something shift inside me, not just physically, but permanently. I'd spent my whole life being the helper, the quiet one, the one who shows up, pays the bills, sends the flowers, picks up the slack. But now I was going to stay quiet, but not powerless, because what my mother didn't know was that her caterer, her venue, her bar tab, all of it was under my name, and I still had the power to cancel every last detail. I don't remember the exact moment I realized I came second in my own family. It wasn't one defining betrayal, not at first. It was 1,000 paper cuts, quiet moments that didn't seem like much until they all bled together. Like how, on my 8th birthday, I asked for a small backyard party with balloons and chocolate cake. My mom said we couldn't afford to do much that year, so she baked a box mix and invited just my grandparents. I didn't complain. I sat there in my paper crown, grateful for what I got. 3 months later, Paige turned 5. There was a petting zoo in our yard. I remember watching the goats being unloaded from a trailer and wondering how that was affordable now. My mom just said, "Well, 5 is a big age." That became the pattern. When I needed new ballet shoes, I had to wait for a coupon. When Paige needed a new leotard, it came the same week, shiny, pink, and gift-wrapped. I remember her twirling in it while I sewed holes shut in mine with dental floss, and still, I never asked why. I think some part of me believed it was my fault, that I wasn't as lovable. Paige had this brightness, a kind of chaotic magic that pulled people in. Teachers adored her. Strangers complimented her. And my mom? My mom practically revolved around her. "She's delicate," she'd say, whenever Paige cried or got a scraped knee. "She's just more sensitive than you." But sensitivity wasn't the problem. It was spotlight addiction. Paige thrived on attention, and my mother fed her like a starved child. Every crisis Paige had, every heartbreak, every B-, every drama with a friend, was met with emergency cupcakes, shopping trips, or girls' nights to lift her spirits. Meanwhile, when I got food poisoning in 9th grade and spent 2 days curled on the bathroom floor, my mom left saltines by the door and texted from work, "Tough it out, sweetie." I did. I always did. By the time I turned 16, I had my first job at a bookstore, saving up for a used car. Paige, 2 years younger, had just declared she wanted to be a singer. My parents signed her up for vocal lessons, then hired a photographer to do headshots, just in case she made it big. I was driving myself to school in a car I bought with my own tips, while they were redesigning Paige's bedroom into a recording studio. She used it once, then decided singing made her tired. I learned early that being dependable came with a price: invisibility. They called me strong, like it was a compliment, as if strength meant I didn't bleed, as if holding everything together meant I had no right to ask for help. I remember once, just once, I cried in front of my mom. I was 17. My period had hit hard and fast while I was working a closing shift. I came home doubled over, pale and shivering. I curled up on the couch and told her I didn't think I could go to school the next day. She looked up from folding Paige's laundry and said, "Honey, you always say you're fine. You're probably just tired. Don't make it bigger than it is." So I didn't. I swallowed my pain, smiled through it, and learned that needing help only disappointed people. By the time college came around, I didn't even bother asking for tuition help. I picked a school that gave me the best scholarship and juggled a work-study job and weekend shifts to cover the rest. Paige got into an arts program out of state. My parents drained their savings to pay her dorm deposit. I helped pack her things. There was no resentment then. Not exactly. Just this aching quiet inside me that said, "This is what love looks like for her. Yours comes with invoices." After college, Paige moved back home when her plans fell through. My mom turned the guest room into a sanctuary for her. Lavender sheets, scented candles, organic snacks. I lived in a shoebox apartment with a leaky faucet and called home only when I knew I had something good to report, because I knew the script. Paige got empathy. I got performance reviews. And yet, Somehow, I kept showing up. Birthdays, bridal showers, Thanksgiving prep. I helped my mom organize every event because that's what I was trained to do. Make things easier for everyone else. And I told myself that maybe, just maybe, it was love. That giving without being seen still counted for something. But looking back now, laying there after surgery, reading that one-sentence text, I realized it didn't. To her, I was still the girl who didn't complain, who could tough it out, who would never dare to ruin Paige's big night. Not even when I was cut open and left alone to heal. Not even when I was bleeding inside and aching for something, anything that looked like care. And maybe if that text had never come, I would have kept playing the part, but it did. And I finally saw the truth in black and white. She's fine. She just wants attention. No, Mom, she wants respect. She wants love that isn't rationed out like dessert. She wants to stop being the backdrop to someone else's celebration. And this time, she's done waiting quietly. You'd think adulthood might have shifted the dynamics. That once we were both grown, my mother would see us differently, see me differently. But nothing changed. If anything, the pattern deepened. It just got better dressed. Paige went through college like she did everything else, dramatically, inconsistently, and with flair. She changed majors 3 times, art history, then photography, then interior design. She'd call me every few months in a panic about deadlines, bills, or boyfriends, and I'd walk her through it all, sometimes from across the country, sometimes while working overtime. She dropped out her 3rd year. My mom told everyone it was just a break to rediscover herself. I was the only one who knew it was because Paige's boyfriend had dumped her, and she couldn't handle being on campus alone. She came home and moved back into her old bedroom, renovated again, of course, this time into a soft, minimalist retreat with a Pinterest-worthy vanity and sage green throw pillows. My mom went to 3 stores to find those exact pillows. She told me on the phone while I was eating dinner at my desk after a 12-hour shift. She just needs time, she said. She'll get back on her feet. And I asked, what about me? Not out loud, just in my head. That was the first time I realized I hadn't asked that question since I was a teenager. What about me? I was living in a cramped 1-bedroom in the city, barely keeping up with my job in event planning and somehow still managing to send my mom money now and then for emergencies she never quite defined. Like the time she asked for help paying for some minor dental work. It turned out to be whitening treatments for Paige, or when she called crying saying the fridge broke and Paige had nothing to eat. I sent $500 that night. The next morning, Paige posted a photo on Instagram, her at brunch with 3 friends, a mimosa in hand, and the caption, "Fridge drama, canceled by blessings." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Because anger didn't fit the version of me my mother kept in her head. I was the calm one, the capable one, the one who made things happen. And worse, I was the one who let them treat me this way. Because I thought if I kept proving myself, one day they'd see it. My mom called me my rock in front of her friends. She'd say it like a compliment. Claire just holds everything together. She never complains. She's so grounded. And every time I heard it, it felt less like praise and more like a job title I hadn't applied for. Grounded. As in stuck. As in never allowed to fly. While Paige changed boyfriends, tried out gigs as a lifestyle blogger, a dog walker, and finally a freelance decorator, I built a career. I got promoted. I took on major clients. I led the logistics for city galas and Fortune 500 product launches. I was managing 6-figure budgets and 5-star venues, but I never bragged. Not because I wasn't proud, but because I knew my mother wouldn't hear it. She only tuned in when Paige was in trouble. One year, I landed a major contract with a hotel chain. I called my mom on the drive home, thrilled to share it. Her response? "That's great, sweetie. Can I call you back? Paige is having a meltdown. Her orchid died, and she thinks it's a sign from the universe." I never mentioned work to her again. You know the worst part? I didn't hate Paige. She wasn't cruel. She was just entitled, Made that way, trained by years of my mother wrapping every disappointment in silk and sugar. It wasn't Paige who stole anything from me. It was our mother who never saw me as someone who needed anything at all. She treated my life like background noise until she needed something. That's how I got roped into Paige's 30th birthday party. My mom called it a milestone, said it was the one thing we can do to show her how loved she is. I was busy. Work was hectic. I had my surgery date coming up and my own life to manage. But when I hesitated, my mother pulled out her old line. "You're so organized, Claire. No one does it like you. I'd be lost without your help." So I helped. I called the venue, negotiated the package, paid the deposit, $2,000 on my own card because she needed time to move money around. I got in touch with a caterer I'd worked with before and got her to cut her usual price by 20% as a favor to me. I reserved the champagne order, sent design ideas, handled the invitations. When I emailed the vendor list, my mom replied, "You're amazing. What would I do without you?" And I just smiled bitterly at the screen. I knew the answer. She'd do it all with Paige anyway, because that's what she always did. But I wasn't bitter enough to walk away, not yet, because some pathetic, stubborn part of me still thought this was the time she'd look at me differently, that maybe planning this would earn me a real thank you, a real moment, a real conversation. And then came the surgery, the silence, the party, and the text. "She's fine. She just wants attention." That was the moment that proved what I hadn't wanted to believe. I was never going to be anything but useful to her. So I did what I'd always done best. I made a plan. But this time, the outcome wouldn't be pretty lighting and thank you cards. This time, I was planning an erasure of their expectations, of their grip on me, of their belief that I'd just keep being the reliable one, no matter how badly they treated me. They wanted a perfect party? Let them see what perfection looks like when the planner walks away. The day of my surgery was a Thursday, early spring. The sky was gray, and I remember thinking it suited the mood. I'd barely slept the night before. Not from fear. I'd done my research, spoken to the doctors, asked all the right questions. I wasn't afraid of the surgery itself. What I dreaded was waking up to silence, and that's exactly what I got. I had told my mom the date 2 weeks prior, sent her the time, the hospital name, even offered to add her to the visitor list. She responded with a thumbs-up emoji. Not a question, not a phone call, just... I should have taken that as a sign. The procedure was scheduled for 9 a.m. I arrived alone, signed the forms alone, and changed into the gown alone. The nurse asked, "Is anyone here to wait with you?" I smiled politely and lied. "They're running late." The truth? No one was coming. My phone buzzed once while I was in pre-op. I remember feeling that flicker of hope. Maybe she changed her mind. Maybe she decided to show up. Maybe she remembered I exist. It was a message from the florist. Final confirmation for Paige's arrangements. Ivory roses with silver eucalyptus, correct? I stared at it for a while. Then I turned the phone off, because some kinds of pain are worse than what they cut you open for. When I came to, hours later, the lights were harsh. My throat was raw from the tube. There was a nurse adjusting my IV, and the curtain was drawn around my bed. No flowers, no voices, just the beep of machines and the dull ache starting to bloom across my abdomen. I tried to reach for my phone, but the movement made me wince. It took me nearly 15 minutes to find it tangled in my blanket. I unlocked it with trembling fingers. No missed calls, no new texts, except one, sent 5 hours earlier, from my mom. "She's fine. She just wants attention. Let's focus on Paige's night. It's a big deal." I blinked, thinking it was a mistake. Maybe it was part of an older conversation. Maybe I missed something. I reread it, then again. The timestamp confirmed it. 10:23 a.m. That was right around the time I was being wheeled into the OR. My mouth went dry. I wasn't sure if it was from the meds or from the realization that was setting in like wet cement. She hadn't just skipped coming. She'd minimized me. erased me, written me off as an inconvenience so she could throw her favorite daughter a birthday party. The nurse came by to check vitals. She asked if I needed anything. I almost said yes. I almost told her what was happening in my chest, this deep cracking sensation that had nothing to do with the surgery. But instead, I smiled. I said I was fine, just like the text said I would. Over the next few days, the silence deepened. No visit, no follow-up, no messages from Paige either, not even a joke or a "heard you're alive." Nothing. I scrolled through Instagram instead. Probably the worst thing I could have done. But when you're stuck in bed and doped up on painkillers, curiosity becomes a cruel instinct. There they were, my mom and Paige, laughing in matching sequin tops, holding glasses of champagne in front of a flower wall. The venue was glowing, gold uplighting, hanging candles, a 10-layer cake that looked like it came out of a magazine. My stomach turned, not just from the anesthesia wearing off, but from the realization that I had built all of it. Every detail, every vendor, every dollar, it was all mine. My work, my connections, my money, and they hadn't even used a dime of it to send me a card. I got a phone call the day after I was discharged, not from my mom, from a family friend, Sylvia. She hadn't even known I had surgery. She was calling to compliment me on the event. "Claire, it was stunning. You outdid yourself." I didn't correct her. I just thanked her. After the call, I opened the receipts folder I had kept on my desktop. I tallied the deposits, $7,440.22 in total, venue, flowers, catering, entertainment, my money. And that wasn't including the incidentals my mom had charged to my card, the helium tanks, the printed menus, the favors. I wasn't even angry yet. I felt hollow, like my body had been emptied twice, once in the OR and once by people I had trusted with every part of me. I stared at the calendar for a long time that night. Paige's party was in 3 days, and suddenly I realized something very important. They thought I was too weak to do anything, that I'd be laid up in bed, helpless and out of the way, that I wouldn't make a fuss because I never had before. But they were wrong, because while I couldn't control how they saw me, I could absolutely control what they were about to walk into. The party? It was going to be unforgettable, just not for the reasons they planned. I printed it out, that text. It sounds petty, doesn't it? But I needed to see it, not just on a screen, not just floating in the ephemeral air of my phone. I needed it real, something I could hold, something I could look at and say, "This happened. This is how little she thought of me." I printed it on plain white paper in thick black font and taped it to my fridge. "She's fine. She just wants attention. Let's focus on Paige's night. It's a big deal." It was right there every time I hobbled out of bed with my hand pressed to my stitches, every time I opened the fridge for ginger ale or toast. That sentence, my mother's voice sealed in punctuation, a message sent by accident but lived out with intention. And slowly I stopped crying. I stopped waiting for her to call, stopped hoping the doorbell might ring, stopped imagining some grand apology with flowers and I didn't know it meant so much, because I did know. It meant everything. So I started planning, not out of spite, not even out of rage, out of clarity. For once in my life, I had proof that my instincts weren't overreactions, that I wasn't exaggerating, that I wasn't just being dramatic or too sensitive. She had said it, typed it, sent it, and now she was about to feel what it looked like when I believed her. That Saturday morning, I sat down with my laptop, a heating pad across my stomach, and opened my email folders. Everything was under my name, every last detail. The venue, my contact, the caterer, my deposit, the florist, the DJ, the bar package, even the neon sign that spelled out 30 and thriving in cursive script. That was me. I clicked open each reservation, each receipt, each agreement I'd forwarded weeks earlier. I knew the cancellation windows. I knew the policies. And most importantly, I knew they had no backup. This wasn't just a party. It was the party. the one my mom had spent the last 2 months gushing about to friends and family, the one that was going to make Paige feel celebrated after such a hard year. I looked over the numbers again. $7,440.22 in total. Not a penny paid back, not a thank you sent, not a call made. And suddenly, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the surgery: control. I started with the venue. The events manager was someone I had worked with before, a kind woman named Jordan who always went above and beyond for vendors she trusted. I emailed her first. "Hi, Jordan. I need to cancel the March 25th reservation. Circumstances have changed. I understand the deposit is non-refundable. Please let me know what paperwork is needed to formally release the booking." She responded within 15 minutes. "Claire, I'm sorry to hear that. We'll process the cancellation immediately. Let me know if you'd like to apply the deposit to a future event." I smiled. It was the first time my face had moved like that in days. Next, the caterer. They hadn't started prep yet, just needed 24 hours notice. I canceled the order, blocked the pending balance from being charged to my card, and received confirmation that no food would be prepared. The florist was trickier. The arrangements were already designed and boxed. But again, I knew the owner. I'd sent several corporate clients their way over the years. I called her personally. "Can you redirect the delivery?" I asked as casually as possible. "To where?" she replied. "My place." "Claire, is everything okay?" "No," I said, "but it will be." When the knock came that afternoon, I opened the door to the scent of eucalyptus and ivory roses, Paige's favorites. I thanked the delivery guy and arranged them in a vase on my dining table. They looked ridiculous in my small apartment. Regal, expensive, out of place, perfect. That evening, I sat with a cup of tea and my laptop, double-checking everything. The balloon company had been paid in full, but I called and told them access to the building would be denied. The DJ was happy to cancel. I filed a chargeback on the LED photo booth my mom had put on my card the week before. And just to be thorough, I contacted the bar rental and cut off the open tab before it could even open. I didn't tell anyone, not even my best friend, not even my therapist. It was a quiet kind of revenge, cold, clean, strategic. And it wasn't about humiliating them. It was about reminding me that I wasn't powerless, that I wasn't the girl in the background, always sweeping up the messes, writing the checks, and clapping the loudest for someone else's spotlight. I was the woman who made things happen. And this time, I was going to unmake them too. I laid back on my couch, wincing as the stitches tugged beneath my ribs. I stared at the roses, 30 and thriving. Let them do it without the lights, the music, the food, or the guest list. Let them stand in a dark, empty room and wonder where all their magic went. Because the truth was, it had always been me. I wish I could say this was all a last-minute thing, that I acted on impulse, rage boiling over and pushing me to do something wild. But no. The truth is, I'd been funding my own erasure for years, methodically, stupidly, and always with a smile. So when I say I planned that party, I mean I planned it, tracked it, budgeted it, paid for it. I had an entire spreadsheet. Guest count, table configurations, floral layouts, menu variations, alternate rain plan if the weather turned. I had built that night from nothing, brick by brick. Just like I'd built every family event we'd ever had. But for Paige? Oh, for Paige, it had to be unforgettable. "You know how she gets," my mother had said, handing me a Pinterest board full of gold-accented balloons, mirror signage, and a 3-tier cake that cost more than my monthly rent. "She just needs to feel special right now." Right now? I thought. Since when has she not been the center of everything? But I didn't say it. Instead, I covered the initial deposits myself. "Just until your father's bonus hits," my mom had said. That was 3 months ago. I covered $2,000 for the venue, $1,300 for the catering deposit, $800 for the custom signage, balloons, lighting rentals, $2,200 for the floral arrangements, including last-minute upgrades when my mom insisted the eucalyptus needed to pop more. And the last one, $1,140. A combination of favors, rush shipping on custom invitations, champagne upgrades, and a specialized vegan cake tier for Paige's friend who was allergic to everything but vibes. Total, $7,440.22. None of it reimbursed, none of it even acknowledged. Just another installment in the Claire's Got It Handled file my family had kept since I was 13. What's worse? The emotional invoices were even higher. The phone calls where I listened to Paige complain about turning 30 and not having a ring yet. The mocktail tasting where I played the designated driver and the emotional buffer while she got tipsy and cried in a bridal boutique she wandered into just for fun. The nights I stayed up revising seating charts because my mother didn't want her friend Nancy sitting next to her cousin. She chews too loud. Every second I spent on that party was a second stolen from my own healing, my own rest, my own dignity. And then came the card. I had given my mom my secondary card months ago for small things. A favor, really. She was overwhelmed, she said. It was easier if she could just charge the little stuff and I'd reconcile it later. At first it was harmless. A few grocery runs, maybe a takeout bill. Then it ballooned. She booked the bar service through my card, ordered custom napkins with Paige's Dirty 30 printed in gold foil, bought a dress, then a backup dress, all on me. The final straw was when I found a charge for a teeth whitening appointment. For Paige. That's when I snapped. I opened my banking app, flagged every transaction tied to that event, blocked her access, changed my PIN, froze the secondary account. It felt surgical. Sharp, precise, like cauterizing a wound that had been festering for years. I wasn't going to fund my own humiliation anymore. They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I wouldn't care, because I never had, at least not loud enough to be heard. But when you're lying in bed, recovering from a procedure that literally pulls your body apart to fix years of silent damage, you start noticing all the other places you've been torn open and stitched back together without anesthesia. Financial abuse doesn't always look like theft. Sometimes it looks like expectation, like silence, like your credit card being passed around while your name is left out of the thank you speech. I pulled up the guest list. 83 people. Most of them I barely knew. Extended family, Paige's yoga friends, some co-workers from the boutique she'd worked at for 6 weeks before quitting. And every one of them thought Paige planned this party herself. Of course she did. Why wouldn't she? She had the spotlight. She had the glitter and the gold tablecloths and the fairy lights. And now she had a mother too busy cheering for her to even glance toward the daughter quietly bleeding in recovery. I looked at my bank summary again. That little string of numbers. $7,440.22. You know what that could have bought? 6 months of therapy. A long overdue vacation, post-surgery home care, a decent mattress, new kitchen chairs, a dishwasher that didn't rattle every time it ran. It could have bought peace, but instead it bought silence. Well, they were about to find out what that kind of silence really costs. Because I wasn't just pulling my money out, I was pulling me out. The caterers? Canceled. The lighting vendor? Refund requested. The bar service? Frozen account. And the venue? Officially notified. I sat back in my chair and stared at the empty calendar on my wall. March 25th. What had once been Paige's big night was now going to be nothing. Just a cold, echoing room with locked doors, disappointed guests, and one very bewildered birthday girl. And the best part? I didn't even have to be there. Because for once, they'd be the ones sitting in my silence. By the time Friday evening arrived, the night before the party, I had canceled everything. Not out of malice, not even out of vengeance. I did it with the same calm efficiency I'd used to build it in the first place. And I didn't gloat. I didn't post about it, I didn't call anyone, and I didn't warn my mother. I wanted her to walk into that venue with her glitter heels clicking across the marble floor, chest puffed with pride, holding Paige's hand, and find nothing. No tables, no staff, no champagne tower, no guests. Just a locked room and an unanswered phone, because sometimes silence is louder than screaming. I had spent 36 years making things easier for everyone, taking care of things, fixing things, showing up, holding back, smoothing it over, and all it got me was a hospital bed with no visitors and a text that called my pain a performance. Not this time. This time, I chose myself. That night, I lay in bed, body sore and weak, but mind clearer than it had been in months. I lit a single candle, ate reheated soup, propped myself up with pillows, and opened the photo album on my phone. Photos of past birthdays, not mine, Paige's. Paige at 5 holding a balloon, Paige at 16 standing next to a leased BMW with a giant red bow, Paige at 25 at the beach house I had helped book as a family gift, and in every background, me, always standing slightly to the side, always holding the cake, holding the decorations, holding the camera. You know who didn't appear in any of those photos? My mom, because she was always sitting at the table or posing for the picture. She was the host in title, but I was the engine behind the whole production. And for the first time, I saw it for what it was. They'd never once celebrated me, not because they forgot, but because they never thought I needed it. Because when you become the one everyone leans on, they forget you have bones that can break. They forget you bleed, too. Saturday morning came. The big day. I got up early, slowly. My body still felt like it had been rearranged from the inside out, but I made myself a cup of coffee and curled up on the couch. I didn't look at my phone. I didn't check my email. I just sat with myself. And then, at exactly 11:17 a.m., the first call came. My mom. I let it ring. Then again. 10 minutes later. Then Paige. Then a third call from an unknown number. Probably the venue manager, or maybe a frantic cousin trying to make sense of the chaos. I didn't pick up. I didn't have to, because I already knew what they were seeing. An empty venue, staff that never arrived, vendors that had been notified, decorations that were never delivered. I imagined my mom in her sparkly dress, pacing in confusion. I imagined Paige, eyes darting around, demanding someone explain what was happening. And for the first time in my entire life, I imagined them having to clean up the mess. That image? It didn't bring me joy, but it brought me peace. At 12:35 p.m., I finally checked my phone. 5 missed calls, 3 voicemails, 2 texts. The first voicemail was from my mom, her voice tight and breathless. "Claire, what happened? Did something go wrong with the caterer? The venue's locked. People are arriving and there's nothing here. Can you call me back?" No apology, no concern for me, just panic over how she looked. The second voicemail came from Paige. "Are you kidding me? You sabotaged this? Are you that bitter? I don't care if you were sick. This was important to me, to us." I laughed. Actually laughed. It hurt, my ribs still healing, but I didn't care. Because in that moment, I felt it. Power. Not revenge, not cruelty. Power. The kind that comes from choosing silence over begging. The kind that comes from saying enough with your actions instead of your voice. I texted my mom back, finally. 1 line. "You said I wanted attention. I gave you exactly what you thought I needed. None." And I turned off my phone. There would be fallout. Of course there would. Tears, blame, spin. They'd rewrite the narrative, call me unstable, selfish, dramatic. But I didn't care, because I had finally stepped out of the background of someone else's celebration and walked straight into my own damn peace. I wasn't going to be their event planner anymore, not for birthdays, not for their image, not for their convenience. From that moment on, they could plan their own damage control. I had finally RSVP'd no to a life where I was only invited to clean up after them. They say silence is deafening, but I never really understood that until I imagined them standing in that empty room. The venue I booked, an upscale loft space with floor-to-ceiling windows and polished concrete floors, was supposed to be the crown jewel of Paige's birthday. My mother had raved about it to anyone who would listen. "It has this industrial chic vibe," she told her book club. "Very New York, very grown-up." And now, it was nothing but locked doors and echoing emptiness. The party was scheduled to start at 1. At 12:45, the calls started again. I didn't answer, but I watched them come in. First my mom, then Paige, then my Aunt Carol, then Paige's best friend Savannah, all of them bouncing off my silence like frantic birds hitting glass. I pictured it clearly. My mom in her rhinestone heels trying to act composed as she tugged on the locked front door. Paige behind her, looking for a mirror, checking her hair, blissfully unaware, until she noticed the lack of movement inside. No music, no catering smells, no tables being set, no guests. That's when the panic would start. She probably called Savannah first, then the planner. But the number led back to me, and I wasn't picking up. Eventually, someone must have flagged down the building staff, demanding answers. I could imagine Jordan, the venue manager, calmly explaining that the event had been canceled days ago, that everything had been properly documented, that the original client had pulled out, and no one else had followed up. By 1:15, they would have figured it out, that I had walked away, that everything they thought they could count on, me, my presence, my willingness to swallow pain and show up anyway, was gone. And what they were left with? Nothing. I kept checking Instagram, not because I wanted to gloat, but because I knew Paige couldn't help herself. And right on cue, there it was, her story updated at 1:42 p.m., a photo of her standing outside the venue, arms crossed, the sun catching the shimmer in her dress. The caption was short and cold. "Well, this is what happens when you trust the wrong people." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. At 2:04 p.m., my mom called again, left another voicemail. "Claire, what happened? Why would you do this? People are asking questions. Paige is humiliated. I told everyone you were handling things. Why didn't you say something?" There it was again. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "I'm sorry." Not even a shred of guilt. Just, "You embarrassed us." Just, "You didn't do your job." And that's what I had been to them all along, hadn't I? A quiet employee in a family-run business where love came at the cost of labor. It was never Claire, the daughter. It was Claire, the fixer. Claire, the manager. Claire, the free labor with a smile. I spent the next few hours reading. I hadn't been able to sit still and concentrate in days, but that afternoon I sank into the corner of my couch and opened a book I'd been meaning to read for months. I made tea, turned on a jazz playlist, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel nauseous. I didn't feel dizzy. I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt present. The sun dipped low. Outside, the neighborhood buzzed with weekend noise. Kids on scooters, distant car horns, the clink of glass from the bar across the street. Meanwhile, my phone sat on the counter, lit up with messages I refused to read. Around 5 p.m., I got a text from a friend who had been invited to the party. "Are you okay? Just heard what happened. Your mom's blaming a vendor meltdown. Everyone's confused." I stared at that message for a long time. My mom was already rewriting the story. Vendor meltdown. Of course, that's how it would go. I knew the pattern. Blame the outside. Preserve the image. Protect Paige. Claire? She was just the one who disappeared. Let them say what they want. I was done writing rebuttals to a family that never asked for the truth, only for damage control. At 6:32 p.m., one final call came through. It was my dad. We hadn't spoken in weeks. He stayed out of things, mostly. Quiet, passive, absent in every meaningful sense, except when he wanted to remind me that family sticks together. He didn't leave a voicemail, just rang once, then nothing. That silence felt like confirmation, not disappointment, not grief, just a shrug. I let the screen fade, then I stood up, still sore but steady, and walked to the kitchen. I poured a glass of the rosé I'd been saving, lit a candle, brought the vase of ivory roses. Yes, those same flowers intended for Paige's big centerpiece, into the living room and placed them where they belonged, right in front of me. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd sent me those roses without knowing it, paid for them with my own money, picked them out thinking they'd make someone else feel celebrated. And now, they were mine. As I sat back and let the soft light wash over the petals, I thought, this is what it feels like when no one shows up for you, but you finally show up for yourself. They got their silence, and I finally got my seat at the center of the room. Sunday morning started with 12 missed calls, 7 from my mother, 3 from Paige, 2 from numbers I didn't recognize. Probably relatives who hadn't spoken to me since I was 10, but suddenly felt entitled to scold me on behalf of the family. The voicemails told me everything I needed to know. My mom's tone had shifted overnight, from panicked and confused to full-blown performative outrage. "How dare you ruin your sister's birthday like that, Claire? You humiliated her. You humiliated me. We had to apologize to everyone. We had to send people home. Do you have any idea how that looked?" Not a word about the surgery. Not a word about that text. Not even a shadow of reflection. Just blame. Just shame. Just the same voice that had been drilling through my chest since I was old enough to recognize disappointment in her eyes. Paige's voicemail came next. Her voice shook, not from sadness but fury. "I knew you'd make this about you. You always do. You can't stand it when I'm the one being celebrated. You couldn't just be a decent human being for one day? Grow up." That was rich, coming from the same person who never once asked how my procedure went, who never brought soup, called, or sent a text that didn't include a link to party favors. But I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop. There was something I needed to do, something overdue. I opened a blank document and started typing, $7,440.22. I itemized every single expense: venue, catering, rentals, decor, tips. Then I made a second list, the charges on the secondary card, the ones my mom said she'd clear up later. It totaled over $8,200. But this document wasn't for court. It wasn't even about the money. It was a receipt of memory, a record of everything I gave that they treated like nothing. By midday, my inbox was filled with messages from extended family, mostly questions. What happened? Why was the party canceled? Is it true you refused to pay at the last minute? And my favorite, your mother's really struggling. She says this has caused a lot of stress on her heart. Maybe you should reach out. Her heart. I almost laughed. She hadn't reached out when I was under anesthesia. But now? Now that her social reputation was bruised, I was the selfish one. That night, I sat down and did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote an email to my entire family. No theatrics, no guilt, just facts. Subject, for clarity. Hi, everyone. I know there are a lot of stories floating around about the canceled party, and I wanted to offer a few facts since my name seems to be coming up more than usual. Over the past 3 months, I planned Paige's birthday party on behalf of our mother. I covered every deposit and signed every contract. I also covered over $8,000 in expenses. 3 days before the event, after undergoing a major surgery, I received a text message from Mom that read, "She's fine. She just wants attention. Let's focus on Paige's night. It's a big deal." That text wasn't meant for me, but it said everything I needed to hear. So I quietly canceled everything. There was no meltdown, no sabotage, just a decision to stop pretending my silence was consent. If you feel the need to take sides, go ahead, but know that I am not angry. I'm just done. Claire, I hit send. Then I blocked numbers, muted threads, unfollowed accounts, put my phone on Do Not Disturb, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the problem. I felt like the solution. The dam finally breaking after holding back everyone else's needs for too long. Monday came and went. So did Tuesday. By Wednesday, The narrative had changed. Now it was, Claire's just going through something. She's not herself. We're worried about her mental health. They still couldn't call what happened by its real name, boundary. They treated it like a meltdown because they couldn't admit that for once. I wasn't cleaning up the mess. I was refusing to show up for it. On Thursday, I went outside for the first time in a week. It was sunny, crisp, the kind of spring air that smells like change. I walked slowly, still recovering, still tender, but stronger. I passed by a florist and laughed when I saw a bouquet of ivory roses in the window. Paige's favorites, not mine. I never even had a favorite flower. No one had ever asked. Until that moment, I wasn't sure I had one. But as I looked at the roses, pretty, predictable, performative, I realized I didn't want anything delicate. I wanted something wild, something untamed, something that didn't need to be arranged perfectly to be worth something. Maybe a sunflower or a marigold, maybe something that bloomed on its own, like I was doing now. Because while they were still spinning stories and pointing fingers, I had finally walked away from the table they never made room for me at. It's funny how once you stop playing the role you were cast in, caretaker, fixer, shadow, everyone else scrambles to fill the silence you leave behind. By the weekend, my aunt had texted me a lengthy message about family unity. She said she understood I was hurt, but that I had overcorrected, that I should have spoken up instead of going nuclear. Overcorrected. That was the word she used, as if protecting my own dignity was an overreaction, as if silence wasn't already my second language, as if 36 years of swallowing disappointment didn't count as speaking up. I deleted her message. Then I booked another therapy session. My therapist had been with me through a lot. Breakups, burnout, the slow crawl out of chronic self-sacrifice. But this was different. This time, I wasn't crying over the loss of someone else. I was grieving the version of me who thought love had to be earned through endurance. I'm not angry anymore, I told her during our session. I'm just done. She smiled gently. That's what boundaries feel like. They don't always come with fireworks. Sometimes they're just quiet decisions that stick. Quiet decisions that stick. That became my new motto. Because the old Claire? She'd be writing a long apology email by now. She'd be baking an olive branch into a casserole, showing up at her mother's house with tired eyes and a forced smile, asking, "Can we talk?" She'd be letting Paige scream, letting her mother sigh dramatically and say, "You know how your sister is." And she'd nod, because she always did. But I wasn't her anymore. And I wasn't interested in resuming a part I never auditioned for. The next week, my mom sent a text, just one sentence. "We need to talk face to face. No, I'm sorry. No, how are you? No mention of the surgery, the party, the hurt. Just, we need to talk." Like it was a business meeting, like I'd left a mess and now she needed me to come clean it up. I didn't reply. 2 days later, she showed up at my apartment. No warning, no call, just her and a grocery bag with my favorite soup. Well, what she remembered as my favorite soup. It hadn't been in years, but I let her in. Not because I wanted to, because I was curious. Curious to see how she'd explain away what she'd done when she was finally standing in front of the daughter she'd ignored. She looked around like she hadn't been inside in years, even though she had. I used to beg her to visit. She always said traffic was too much, that Paige needed her, that, "You've got your own life now, honey." Now suddenly, the drive didn't seem so bad. She sat down on the edge of my couch like she was unsure it would hold her. "I don't know what's happened to you," she said eventually, setting the soup down like a peace offering. That was her opener. Not "I hurt you," not "I read what I wrote," not "I realized what I said," just "I don't know what's happened to you." And I realized then, she hadn't come to apologize. She'd come to reset me, to flip the switch back to obedient, to silent, to Claire. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, and looked her dead in the eyes. "You said I was fine, that I just wanted attention, while I was recovering from surgery, alone. She blinked, said nothing. I waited, still nothing. So I kept going. You threw a party for Paige and never even asked how I was. You used my money. You ignored my pain. And when I stopped showing up, you got mad. Not because you missed me, but because you missed what I did for you. Finally, her face cracked. Claire, that text wasn't... I didn't mean it like that. It was a mistake. No, I said calmly. It was a mirror. She shook her head, lips trembling, but no tears. I've done my best. I'm not saying you didn't, I replied. But your best has always been measured by how much you loved Paige and how little I needed. The silence sat between us like a third person in the room. Finally, she said, So, what? Are you cutting us out forever? No, I said. I'm choosing me. That's not the same thing. And it wasn't. I wasn't erasing my family. I was drawing a line between them and the version of me that had quietly accepted crumbs while calling them love. She left a few minutes later, soup untouched. No hug, no tears. Just the tight nod of a woman who'd realized she could no longer manipulate the daughter she thought would never fight back. And I felt lighter, not triumphant, just free. Because the moment you stop asking people to value you and start valuing yourself, everything changes. The power shifts. The air clears. And for once, you stop being the apology and start being the boundary. A week passed. Then 2, no more calls, no texts, no voicemails, no attempts to check in, just silence. But this time, the silence didn't ache. It felt like breath, like space, like peace, not punishment. And I did something I hadn't done in years. I celebrated. Not with a party, not with glitter or cake or overpriced floral arrangements. I celebrated by reclaiming the things they use my energy to decorate everyone else's life. I opened my laptop and planned a weekend away. For me. I found a quiet cabin near the coast, surrounded by woods and wind and distance. I packed soft clothes, my favorite books, and a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion that never seemed to come. This time, I didn't wait for someone to hand me permission. I gave it to myself. The drive was long, but peaceful. Music humming low, windows cracked open just enough to let the world in. When I got to the cabin, I unpacked slowly, deliberately, no rush, no timeline. The kitchen table was bare, so I stopped at a roadside stand and bought a bouquet. Not ivory roses. Paige could keep those. These were wildflowers, unruly, bright, joyful in their chaos, like the parts of me I'd buried for too long. I made a simple dinner, pasta with garlic and olive oil, poured a glass of wine, sat on the porch and listened to the trees sway. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a supporting character in someone else's highlight reel. I felt like a person. No one to impress, no one to fix, no one to validate me. Just me. Present, whole, healing. That night, as I crawled into bed, I thought about the little girl I used to be. The one who watched her mother pour everything into her sister. The one who learned to be low maintenance, quiet, helpful, invisible. And I whispered to her, gently, I see you now. Because someone had to. Because waiting for love that comes only after sacrifice isn't love. It's performance. And I was done performing. 2 months after the non-party, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside, a photo. Me, standing behind Paige at her sweet 16. Holding the cake. My face barely visible, blocked by balloons and other people's hands. On the back, one sentence, handwritten in my mother's neat, sharp script. I miss how close we used to be. I held it for a long time. Miss how close we used to be? We were never close. She was close to my usefulness, my compliance, my silence. We were close like furniture is to a wall, expected, unmoving, never designed to speak. I slid the photo back into the envelope. I didn't call. I didn't write. Instead, I stood up, grabbed my phone, and finally did something I should have done years ago. I deleted the family group chat. Every holiday plan, every urgent message, every time I'd been summoned to fix what they broke, it disappeared. I backed up my own life instead. Booked another trip, this time a solo stay at a spa I used to say I couldn't afford. The truth was, I could afford it. I was just too busy affording everyone else. I reconnected with old friends I'd unintentionally neglected while playing emotional maid to my family. I said yes to invitations that had nothing to do with obligation. I hosted my own birthday. Just a few people, candles, a playlist of songs that weren't curated to please anyone but me. And I gave a toast. I stood up, raised my glass, and said, "Here's to finally realizing that family isn't who shows up when you're useful. It's who shows up when you're bleeding and still sees you as whole." The room went quiet, not in discomfort, but in understanding. Because they got it. Because they'd lived it too. Afterward, one of my friends leaned in and whispered, "That was brave." But it didn't feel like bravery. It felt like honesty. And honesty, after a lifetime of performance, is the purest kind of freedom. So if you're reading this wondering if your silence is strength or just survival, ask yourself this: do they love you, or do they love what you do for them? Because when my mother called my pain attention-seeking, she gave me the greatest gift of all. She told me exactly what I was worth to her, and I believed her. So I stopped giving her everything, and for the first time, I finally had something left for myself. It's strange how quiet life becomes when you stop chasing love that doesn't know how to sit still. When I stopped showing up, no one came running. Not really. There were some messages, some stories whispered through relatives. One cousin said my mom was heartbroken. Another claimed Paige was trying to forgive me. But none of it reached me directly. Not through honesty, just echoes bouncing off the walls of a house I no longer visited. That house. I used to think of it as home. Now I couldn't drive past it without feeling like a stranger. I didn't want revenge. I didn't need anyone to grovel. I only wanted one thing, for them to see me. Not the version of me they built to serve them, but the real Claire. The woman who gave, not because she was weak, but because she believed love was earned through sacrifice. But some people will never see you unless you're broken in ways that make them feel whole, and I was done being that kind of mirror. One day, Paige emailed me, not called, not visited, just sent an email with the subject line, "Mom isn't doing well." The body said, "She's really down since the party. She says she wishes you would come back. She doesn't know how to fix it. I don't either." I stared at that message for a long time. It was the closest thing I'd ever gotten to an apology. But still, no ownership. No mention of what was said. No acknowledgement of the surgery, the silence, the betrayal. Just a vague invitation to resume the old roles, to go back to pretending. I didn't reply. I archived it. That's the thing about closure. Sometimes you don't get it from the people who hurt you. Sometimes you give it to yourself. And I had. Not through confrontation, not through revenge, but through release. I no longer needed them to admit what they'd done. I just needed to stop building my life around their denial, so I did. A year later, I stood at the edge of a cliff in Big Sur, wind in my hair, eyes brimming, not with pain, but with something lighter, something that tasted like relief. I'd taken the road trip I used to say I'd do someday. I had a new job, one that respected boundaries, that didn't call after hours, that didn't see burnout as a badge of honor. I had people around me who didn't flinch when I said no, friends who brought soup when I was sick, a partner who knew how to listen without fixing. I had a version of peace I'd never thought possible, not the fragile kind built on eggshells and tolerance, but a real, living kind, one I had built for myself. And when I think back to that text, she's fine, she just wants attention. I don't cry anymore. I smile, because she was right in a way. I did want attention. I wanted to be seen. But not like that, not pitied, not doubted, not used. I wanted to be witnessed, held in truth, respected in absence. And now I am. They never showed up for me, but I did. So here's my ending. Not dramatic, not tragic, just honest. I was the daughter who made everything work in silence until I finally gave myself permission to walk away. And now I'm not just fine, I'm free.